Hello everyone, welcome to my channel. I'm Jordyn and welcome to my March and April reading wrap up. This video is going to be a little bit different because I have actually already recorded the March portion. I recorded it in April, back when it would have been a good idea to upload just that monthly wrap up, and then life got busy, time passed, and now here we are well into May and I haven't posted March or April's wrap-ups. So I thought I would film April's portion today and then I would just combine them into one, I guess, bi-monthly wrap-up, which I also did for January and February, so maybe this is just my new standard. But either way, I'm going to tell you all about the books that I read back in March as well as April. I usually do this in kind of three sections. I start with some statistics for the month. I have started really tracking a lot of different aspects of my reading. So not just genres and ratings, but also things like publishers and diversity, which I'm really excited about. Then I talk about the specific books that I read, first through the books that I read for videos, which usually I just give a small recap of and then point you to that video if you would like more in-depth reviews and thoughts. And then thirdly, I wrap up the books that I have not yet talked about in videos so that I can give a little bit more in-depth reviews. So now I'm going to cut back to my footage that I already recorded with my March wrap up, and then I'll bring you back here so I can go through the 8 books that I read in April. So see ya in a sec. As per usual on this channel, we are well into the next month, so I am just casual today, gonna try to get through this fairly quickly and tell you all about the 19 books that I read in March. I did also DNF one book, so I will talk about that in its relevant section, but I'm not including that book in any of my statistics that I'm going to go through here at the beginning. The first statistic that I have is of the 19 books that I completed this month, 17 I have already featured in videos and only 2 I read outside of videos, quote unquote, for fun. That's definitely a norm for my channel. I do a lot of reading vlogs and I like talking about the books that I'm reading as I read them so that I don't have quite so many to talk through in my wrap up. So if I have talked about any of these books in previous videos, I will of course link those below and tell you to go watch those if you want more in-depth thoughts. As far as genre breakdown, I was quite surprised when I saw this, but 13 of the books that I read were mysteries or thrillers, which is a huge chunk of my books. And while I would say that's one of my favorite genres, I think that's majorly skewed in that direction, and I want to try to diversify that a little bit more and read some other genres going forward. 4 books that I read were contemporary or romance, and 2 books were science fiction. As far as star ratings for the books that I read in March, I read one 1-star book, which I got pretty passionate about, and I will tell you about that in my reviews. I read 4 2-star books, 5 3-star books, 4 4-star books, and 5 5-star books in March, which is amazing. I really love that I read so many 5-star books. I do think some of them are going to be my favorites of the year, and I'm really happy that I'm getting some really high quality books in amongst the high quantity of books that I'm also reading. That works out to an average rating of 3.42 stars. As far as formats that I read these books, 8 of them I own a physical copy of, but I listened to primarily via audio. 6 books I own physically and read primarily physically. 3 books I do not own a copy of at all, and I listened to the audiobooks. And 2 books I read as ebooks via NetGalley. As far as author demographics go, 14 of the books that I read had authors who identify as female, 5 had authors who are male, and 5 of the 19 books had some type of diverse representation, whether that be race, ethnicity, sexuality, or disability representation, which is about 26%. Unfortunately, that's not as high as I would like it, especially because I am including all of those different types of diversity. Though I will say a lot of the books I read have intersectionality within them, so they might be an author of color who also writes in LGBTQ characters or has disability representation, and I don't count that as double, that just counts as one book with diverse representation. So this is something I'm going to continue looking into as I track my reading going forward so that I can really make sure my reading is truly diverse and I'm getting a variety of points of view and reading about people and characters that are not necessarily just like me. As far as publishers go of the books that I read, 14 of the books that I read are imprints of the big 5 publishers. So that's Macmillan, Simon & Schuster, Penguin Random House, HarperCollins, and Hachette. Whereas only 5 of the books were part of independent publishers. That's also something that, as of now, I'm just tracking to see where the books that I'm picking up naturally land, but is something I would like to intentionally focus on going forward to make sure that I am reading a good majority of independently published books and not just reading what the big 5 publishers are pushing at me. And that is all that I have for statistics. So let's go ahead and get into the actual books that I read in March. I'm going to start with all of the videos that I did and talk about the books that I read as part of those videos. And if you want more of my thoughts, I will point you to go watch those videos. The first vlog that I posted in March was my book of the month reading vlog. And to be honest, this feels like forever ago. I can't believe this was only a little over a month ago because my thoughts on these books are already kind of fleeting. But I attempted to read 3 books for that video. The first first was What Lies in the Woods by Kate Alice Marshall. This is a mystery thriller book. I have more thoughts in that vlog, as well as I also featured this in a book bracket March Madness style video where I pitted 2023 release books against each other to figure out my favorite new release book that I've read so far this year. So feel free to reference either one of those videos if you want more of my thoughts about this one. But overall, I was a little underwhelmed and I ended up giving it 3 stars. And then also in that book of the month reading vlog, I read The Writing Retreat by Julia Bartz. This is about a group of writers who go to this writing retreat being hosted by this really prolific author. Once they get there, they find out it's not quite what they were expecting. I also featured this book not only in the book of the month reading vlog, but also in that book bracket video, and ended up giving this one 4 stars. Within the book of the month vlog, I also tried to read The Shards by Bret, Easton, Ellis. I unfortunately DNF'd it on page 1 because the very first sentence of that book took up the entire first paragraph and almost the whole first page, and I could just tell the writing style was not going to be something I vibed with, and I didn't want to push myself through 600 pages of a story I didn't care about. So I just decided to DNF it. I have already sold my copy of the book, so I don't have it anymore, and that is the one book that I DNF'd this month. Though I do think it's fair to say that I barely even started this one, so is it really a DNF? I don't know. Maybe more of just an unhaul before even starting it. The next video that I posted in March was my backlist readathon vlog, and this was a wild ride of a reading experience. This was definitely the biggest range of opinions I had on books within one video. I read 4 books. The first one was Never Let Me Go by Kazuo Ishiguro, which is a sci-fi book. I ended up giving it 2 stars. I also read The Love Hypothesis by Elle Hazelwood. This is a contemporary romance book. I just didn't feel the STEM passion in this one, so I also gave this book 2 stars. And then I read The Enigma of Room 622 by Joelle Dicker. This is a murder mystery book set at a hotel in Switzerland. This author is from Switzerland. This book was actually originally written in French and has been translated to English, and this was so good. I would like to just point you to that vlog to hear my full thoughts about it because the feelings were fresh. My passion about this book was fresh, and I feel like I really well articulated what exactly I enjoyed about this book because it was a very slow burn mystery, but the payoff was so worth it, and I gave it 5 stars. And then the last book that I read for this vlog is This Is Where It Ends by Marieke Nijkamp. And while I'm pointing you to go watch that vlog, I'm gonna send you there for my thoughts on this book as well, because long story short, I had some major problems with this book. I gave it 1 star. I cried about it in that vlog because it really hit me in the worst way, and I don't really want to revisit those feelings. So we're gonna move right along. The third video that I posted in March, I've already mentioned. It was that March Madness 2023 release book bracket, and for that video, I intentionally read a lot of 2023 releases in March. The first being Adrift by Lisa Brideau, which is actually not out yet. This book releases on May 9th of 2023, and I highly recommend pre-ordering this book because I loved it. I got this book through NetGalley. It is a science fiction kind of thriller book about this woman who wakes up one day on a boat in the middle of the ocean, and she has no idea why she's there or even who she is, and she has to figure out how to survive her current situation. This book is also set slightly into the future, so it has a lot of commentary on environmentalism as well as immigration policies, which might not sound like they fit very well in a thriller, but it worked really well for me. I really like when real life elements are brought into books, and this one did that really well, so gave it 5 stars. The next book that I read for this video is Final Offer by Lauren Asher. This is the 3rd book in the Billionaire Brothers series, or whatever it's called, or Dreamland Billionaires maybe, but it's a series about these 3 brothers whose grandfather has passed away, and he has passed on a list of requirements or a list of tasks that the brothers must do in order to earn their inheritance, and each book is about a different brother's love story. This 3rd book I thought would be my favorite because it was the character I was most interested in, and it included tropes that are usually my favorites in romance, but it really didn't deliver, so I gave it 2 stars. The next book that I read for that video is The House in the Pines by Anna Reyes. This book I had seen a lot of buzz about, so I was really curious to see if it would live up to that hype, and for me it did. I ended up giving it 4 stars, and I really enjoyed the entire ride. The next book I read for that video is I Have Some Questions for You by Rebecca Makkai. This is a mystery book that I would closely compare to The It Girl by Ruth Ware and In My Dreams I Hold a Knife by Ashley Winstead. It's a murder mystery, dark academia vibes. This one was just fine for me. Already a lot of the details are fading from my memory, so I ended up giving it 3 stars. The next book that I read is The Girl in the Zoo by Jennifer Lauer. I was actually sent this book by the publisher, which I really appreciate, and also the package included a lot of really cool little knickknacks from the author, including a bookmark that she sewed herself, a nice note from the author. It had like a cosmic brownie in there as a treat, and some other little things that connected to the book. that package I really appreciated receiving. Unfortunately, this book did not work for me. This is a book set in the future when AI has taken over the world and they've essentially captured humans and are now holding them hostage, keeping them captive in zoos. Really cool premise, and for how cool the premise is, the payoff and the execution just really fell flat, and so I ended up giving it 2 stars. The next book that I read is called The Jump by Brittney Morris, and I was so excited to read this book. Brittney Morris is one of my favorite authors of all time. Slay and The Cost of Knowing are 2 previous books that she's written that I gave them both 5 stars. They've been favorites of years past, so I was really highly anticipating this one. It's a young adult contemporary book with some science fiction elements, and I'm so glad that this one lived up to all of my expectations. I think it might be my favorite Brittney Morris book, but I'm still gonna have to sit on that for a little while to make sure that that's true, so I gave it 5 stars. And then I read The Last Word by Taylor Adams. This is a thriller that comes out later in April, highly anticipated by a lot of people because this author wrote No Exit. I really enjoyed this one, so I gave this one 5 stars as well. The next book that I read for this video, I promise we're getting to the end of it, is The Senator's Wife by Liv Constantine. This is a thriller that comes out on May 23rd. I had a copy of this book through NetGalley, and this is a domestic thriller that primarily follows this couple who is a senator and his new wife. Both of them were married previously and both of their spouses died, and then they have gotten together and gotten married afterwards, so there are rumors flying about what exactly happened in their past and their motives for being together, and then things start to happen in the future. I don't typically love domestic thrillers, but I think this one really worked for me because I liked the political elements that came into play. I liked following political figures. I thought it was a little bit more believable that this drama would be happening to them and that they would keep so many secrets because they are a little bit more in the public eye. So for that reason, I really generally enjoyed it and gave it 4 stars and would recommend it. The next book that I read for that video is The Villa by Rachel Hawkins. This is a thriller that I'm actually not going to talk very much about because I did do a full book discussion on this book with my friend Jessie from Reading with Jess for her Sleep When I'm Dead book club. I will link that replay video down below in case you missed the live discussion of it. But we went into all of our thoughts on this book, all of the spoilers, everything. So if you want to hear all those in-depth thoughts, definitely go check that video out. But I ended up reading this book 3 stars. The next book that I read is Finlay Donovan Jumps the Gun by Elle Cosimano. This is the 3rd book in the Finlay Donovan series. For some context, I gave the first book in this series, I think 4 stars. I gave the second book 3 stars, and I gave this 3rd book 4 stars. So I did like it better than the second book in the series. I thought this had some fun elements of like this police training academy that I liked reading about. And I also feel like this book series knows what it is. It's a fun time. It's not trying to be too serious or too shocking with its twists. It's just something you can pick up and fly through, and so for that I think it did a good job and I gave it 4 stars. And then the last book that I read for this March Madness video is Symphony of Secrets by Brendan Slocumb. This is another book that I was so highly anticipating because this author's previous book called The Violin Conspiracy was my number 2 favorite book of 2022, and I was hoping this follow-up would be just as good. This book I would say is kind of a historical fiction mystery. I'm so happy that this book completely lived up to every expectation that I had. This author does such a good job of infusing his passion for music into his books and writing really interesting stories and mysteries that just make me want to know what's going on. They make me want to understand the music they're talking about, and I am very much not a musical person, and I really loved all of it. I gave it 5 stars. Spoiler for that book bracket video, this is the book that won the bracket. Is probably my favorite book that I've read so far this year, and probably certainly will show up on my favorites list at the end of this year. I so highly recommend it. Even if it doesn't sound exactly like your cup of tea, I recommend just giving it a try and seeing if it speaks to you. And now let's get into the 2 books that I have not already featured in videos, I haven't talked about already. The first one is The Twyford Code by Janice Hallet. This book, I really didn't know what to expect going into it. I think I won this book from a giveaway on one of my friend's Instagrams. Kat from Cat Chats had an extra copy. All I knew was this was a mystery book, and the title, The Twyford Code, had me thinking it would probably have something to do with cracking a code of some sort. And it turns out it's about this guy who, when he was younger, he was in this class with this teacher who started reading the class this book by, I think the author was something Twyford. And this teacher was so obsessed with this book because she thought there were secret like clues and messages integrated into the book that she was trying to solve. And she was including the class in her mystery solving. They went on field trips to try and find more information out about the author who wrote this book. She was just completely obsessed with solving this mystery. And one day when they were on a field trip to crack this code, the teacher went missing and this guy had never seen the woman again. So he grew up, he always thought that was weird, but never really put too much thought into it because he was a kid at the time. And then as an adult, he finds another copy of that book. And it brings back all these memories of what happened when he was a child, and he decides to look into the mystery of that book and what happened to his teacher who was trying to solve that mystery. And what's really interesting about this book is it's told completely in audio recordings, as in we're getting the transcripts of these recordings that this guy is recording on his phone or some recorder, chronicling his time solving this mystery. I did have a physical copy of this book, but I ended up listening to it on audio. I think it was on Scribd, and I think that did me a big disservice while reading this book. You would think audio transcripts would translate really well to an audiobook, but one thing that really bugged me is that this book had a bunch of short transcripts. So short chapters essentially, but at the start of every single one, it would start with a report of like when the recording was taking place, who it was by, what the audio quality was like. And that just got really repetitive to hear at the start of every single chapter because it was pretty unimportant information. And I think had I been reading it physically, my eyes would just be able to skim past that part and get to the bulk of the actual book. But on audio, you can't just skim through it. You have to listen to it every single time, and it was a lot. It got a little grating to listen to chapter after chapter, and that's not really the book's fault. So I feel bad letting that hinder my rating and review of the book, but it's hard to separate, you know, your reading experience from the book itself. So unfortunately, because I didn't like listening to it very much, I didn't enjoy the rest of the mystery very much either. I ended up giving it 3 stars, and my recommendation would be to read this book physically and not listen to the audio. And then the last book that I read in March is Lavender House by Lev A.C. Rosen. This was a book I had saved on my Scribd for a long time. I knew I wanted to read it at some point. I just never really had a reason to read it. I didn't have a reading vlog or anything. And then at the end of March, I found myself without any videos currently going on, so I was like, let me just pop on this book that I've been saving for a rainy day, and I flew through the audio. This is a book about our main character who is a detective, or maybe a police officer. He's recently actually been fired for his job for being caught having relations with another man in the bathroom of a bar. This book is set in 1952, so large topics of homophobia, and that's what sets off this character being fired from his job. And then he actually gets called by these people who have a crime and specifically want him to look into it. There was a murder at this place called Lavender House, which is essentially a safe space for LGBTQ characters who don't have anywhere else safe to live or be themselves. And they specifically call that detective to solve the case because they know that he'll understand their lifestyle. This book is pitched as Knives Out with a queer historical twist, and I definitely think it hits that queer historical part. And while it has the murder mystery of Knives Out, I think one thing that really sticks out to me that I loved about Knives Out the movie is the way it uses humor and kind of turns popular murder mystery tropes on its head, or tries to kind of overdo them in a comical way. You know, it's not just a straightforward murder mystery, and I feel like this book was kind of missing that. I don't know if this book was trying to be funny and I just missed it, or if that's not what it was trying to do, but for some reason having the Knives Out kind of parody of a murder mystery in my mind made me think this is what that would be, and it just didn't hit in that right way. So it's kind of a weird thing where I can't put my finger on exactly what I didn't like about this book, but I just didn't love it. It was just fine for me. I really liked the queer historical elements of it. I just didn't enjoy the Knives Out part of it. So I ended up giving this one 3 stars. It looks like this is actually going to be part of a series, and the second book, called The Bell in the Fog, comes out on October 10th. It looks like it follows that same detective solving another mystery, so I might consider picking that one up to see if that plot and that mystery works better for me. But at the end of the day, I gave this one 3 stars, and I was disappointed by a book that I was hoping would be like a little hidden gem that I had forgotten about from the previous year, but not the case. Okay, here we are. It's time for my April wrap up. This should be a little bit quicker because I only read 8 books in April and then DNF'd 2 others. Of those 8 books, 4 were featured in videos and 4 were quote-unquote for fun. As far as genre breakdown goes, 3 of the books were mystery or thriller books, 3 of them were contemporary or romance books, and then 2 were historical fiction. For my ratings, I had 0 1-star books, I had 3 2-star books, which is sad, 2 3-star books, 3 4-star books, and 0 5-star books, which is also sad. And all of that adds up to an average rating of 3.0. For formats of the books, 4 of the books I owned a physical copy of but read the audio version. 2 books I do not own a physical copy of and listened to the audio. 1 I own physically and read physically, and then 1 was an ebook that I got through NetGalley. All 8 of the books that I read in April were by authors who identify as female, as far as I know. For diversity representation, 4 of the 8 books, or 50%, included some type of diversity, including race, sexuality, and disability. And then as far as publishers, 6 of the 8 books, or 75%, were published by imprints of the big 5 publishers. So 2 Simon & Schuster, 1 Hachette, 2 Penguin Random House, and 1 Macmillan. And then 2 were by independent presses, including Penzler and Kensington. So now let's get into the books that I read. So the first video that I put out in April was my Aardvark reading vlog, within which I completed 3 books and DNF'd the 2 books that I mentioned earlier. So the books that I completed, the first one was 48 Clues into the Disappearance of My Sister by Joyce Carol Oates. This is a mystery book about a girl whose sister disappeared, as indicated by the title, and she's trying to look into different clues that her sister may or may not have left around her disappearance. I didn't love this book. I gave it 2 stars, and if you would like to know more about why, you can go watch that video. The next book that I finished for that video is The House of Eve by Sadiqa Johnson. This is a historical fiction book set in the 1950s that follows 2 different Black women. One is in college and one is in high school, and we get both of their stories that we're not really sure how they're related. They don't know each other, but because they are in the same area, they do eventually intersect. And this book was really interesting. I really enjoyed it. I ended up giving it 4 stars and would highly recommend you going back and watching that vlog again if you would like some more coherent thoughts from me about what I enjoyed about it. And then the last book that I completed during that video is A Half-Baked Murder by Emily George. This is a cozy mystery about our main character who is looking to open a cannabis bakery. And as is typical of me in cozy mysteries, I really liked the small business element of this book. I liked learning about her launching her business and figuring out the nuances of running a cannabis bakery, whereas the mystery portion really fell flat, so I ended up giving the book 3 stars. The 2 books that I DNF'd within this video are The Dream Builders by Oindrilla Mukherjee and Gilded Mountain by Kate Manning. Once again, you can reference that video if you would like to know a little bit more about why. The Dream Builders I gave a really good chance, and I think it could be great for the right reader. It just wasn't quite great for me. And then Gilded Mountain just did not catch my attention, and I wasn't in the mood for such a slow historical fiction book, so I set it down and moved on to what I was in the mood for. The one other book that I read for a video in April was Rootless by Crystal Zara Apaya. I read this for my Book of the Month reading vlog. I also read 2 other books for that vlog, but I ended up reading them in May. But that video is already up, so you can go watch and hear my in-depth thoughts about Rootless. But for me, this book really made me reflect on a lot of things. It is about this couple where in the present day the wife has left the husband, but we don't know why as the reader, and then we flash back to 19 years previous and we see their relationship start, and then we meet them again 1 year later and later and later. So we move through time as their relationship develops and we find out what has led them to their current situation. My initial rating for this book was actually 3 stars, but I have since raised it to 4 stars because it is just very thought-provoking. So I really enjoyed it. This book does cover the topic of abortion, so content warning there. And then next, let's talk about the 4 books that I read in April and have not featured in videos. The first is The Friend Zone by Abby Jimenez. Let me start off by saying I really love Abby Jimenez's writing. I have loved both Part of Your World and now Yours Truly by this author. I think she's great, but this book did not do it for me. This is about this girl who is planning her best friend's wedding, and while doing that meets the best man in that wedding, and they get along, but at the start of the book our main character has a boyfriend who is off in the military, which comes with its own set of kind of issues for the main character that she's dealing with her boyfriend, but ultimately she feels like she can't be with this guy because of that situation, and then eventually they come together. It's a romance, so I don't know. Spoilers, not spoilers. And she also is going through some health issues where she's considering undergoing a procedure that would make her infertile. And she's having a lot of pain right now surrounding her periods, so that's another topic of the book. My issues of this book are multiple. First of all, I don't feel like The Friend Zone is an accurate title for this book or accurate description of what this couple is going through. I don't think meeting a girl who has a boyfriend means she's putting you in the friend zone. And I don't know if that's completely what the intention was here. I've had some people argue to me that that's not what is being referred to, but when I went into this book, that's how the situation was set up, and I have a problem with that because I just think that a girl being friendly to you does not mean she owes you anything more than a friendship, regardless of whether she has a boyfriend. But certainly if she has a boyfriend, she has the right to tell you, I don't want to engage with you. And if she still has a job to do that includes planning a wedding that you are in, she's not putting you in the friend zone. She's just doing her job and being a person with a boyfriend. So that was a weird like start to the relationship. And then later in the book, it gets into some topics that I've seen other reviewers have issues with, and I have not personally struggled with infertility, so I can't speak on whether or not that whole topic within this book was handled well or not. It didn't bother me personally, but seeing other people react negatively to that put a bad taste in my mouth around that issue, if that makes sense. I think it is an important topic to include in books and to have candid discussions about, but I think there is a level of sensitivity that you have to have when you tackle a topic like that. And so I guess my message regarding that is that that's not the sole reason I'm rating this book low. Mine is more about like the relationship. I just didn't like it. I didn't like Josh really at all. I don't know what she saw in him, but also there are these other issues that I just thought I would bring attention to so that you can form your own decisions whether you read this book, you can think critically about it, or if the topic of infertility or potential infertility with a certain outcome is going to be harmful for you to read, then you can know that and not read it. So I gave this book 2 stars. I'm glad this wasn't the first Abby Jimenez book that I ever read. I would be interested in reading the second book in this series only because it follows our main character's best friend, and I would like to protect that best friend with my whole heart. I really enjoyed her as a character and would like to see her story. But The Friend Zone was 2 stars. The next book that I read in April is Happy Place by Emily Henry. I don't know if I really need to talk about this book and what it's about because it is one of the most anticipated books this year for a lot of readers. But if you don't know what it's about, this is a contemporary romance that has the second chance romance trope. It's about this couple who was engaged and a few months ago ended their engagement. However, they are part of a group of friends that does a yearly summer vacation together, and that vacation time is coming around. They end up at the vacation with each other, and because of things that come to light within the friend group, they decide to pretend that they are still together because they don't want to tell their friends yet that they broke up. This I thought was a really cute premise. I love books about people on vacation. People We Meet on Vacation is my favorite Emily Henry book to date. And this had a lot of those similar vibes. I liked learning about their traditions on this annual vacation together and just learning all of the friendship dynamics that they have together. That was really fun. I do also usually like the second chance romance trope. I'm not sure why, I just like when characters do have history together. And so in general, I just thought this was a fun, cute time, and I don't have much more to say about it. So I gave it 4 stars. The next book, however, was absolutely not a fun, cute time. The next book I read was Yellow Wife by Sadiqa Johnson. If you remember, this is the same author as The House of Eve, which I also read earlier that month. Since I really enjoyed that one, I decided to go ahead and try out this author's backlist that I've seen a lot of really great reviews for. And those reviews are right. This book is great, but it is so sad. This is one of the hardest books to read that I've ever read. This is about our main character, who is a woman who is a slave, and she has been told that when she turns 18 she will be freed, but she's not sure whether or not she can believe that. And the main character basically has to decide whether or not she's going to stick it out and wait until she turns 18 to find out if she is actually going to be freed from her slave owner, or if she's going to try to escape, run away, free herself, and risk her life in that process. Let's see what I wrote in my actual review for this book, because I think I said it better. I said, "This was so hard to read, but what an extremely well-told and moving story. The plot kept moving in ways I wasn't expecting, and my heart broke multiple times for the main character and everything she and those around her went through. Massive content warnings for depiction of slavery, graphic scenes of abuse, including whipping and flogging, rape, and on-page death of a parent and multiple infants." Make sure you know what to expect going into this one. I was expecting something lighter based on this author's other novel that I read, The House of Eve, which was still hard-hitting, but not nearly as sorrowful as this one. So yeah, this book is so difficult to read, but what it ultimately builds to is so impactful, and I love that and I appreciate that. It's just hard to recommend this book without overstating how difficult it is to read. So if that sounds like something you'd be interested in, I do think it's worth it, but make sure you are in a headspace where you can read a lot of really graphic and tragic things. And I rated that book 4 stars. The last book that I read in April is called The New Mother by Nora Murphy. This is a book that I read through NetGalley. It actually publishes on May 30th of this year. This book is said to be a mystery thriller, though I would challenge that. There's maybe a small mystery element to it, but I think it's much more of just a slow burn, hard-hitting contemporary following a new mother that has something weird going on with one of her neighbors. I was very confused as I was reading this book because I was expecting a thriller. I was expecting twists to come or things to happen, and we just kept getting a lot of the same thing over and over again. This is following a woman who has a baby and is staying home with that baby, first through her maternity leave from her job, and then trying to go back to work, and then ultimately deciding that's not working for her and deciding to stay home with her baby while her husband works. And those scenes about what that postpartum period is like were really, really well done, I think. They were very raw into the moments of just extreme fatigue, extreme confusion, extreme loneliness that can happen during that time if you're not prepared for it and you don't have people around you who can help you. And I think that that's an interesting and important topic to include in books. I just don't think it did this book a service because it was also trying to do this mystery thing that really wasn't a mystery, because it was clear what was happening the whole time. We just had to keep reading about what was going on with this neighbor of hers who he keeps telling her, like, I completely understand what you're going through. I have this daughter who he now stays home with, and like they relate on some things, but there's something off about their relationship. And it's weird and unsettling, but it doesn't really go anywhere, and it just wasn't all that interesting to read about. The characters other than the main character were all just super flat and one-dimensional. It was like each person was either a good guy or a bad guy, and there was no nuance or questioning which was which. I don't know, I just didn't get it. So I rated this book 2 stars, and I don't think I would recommend it. I'm trying to figure out if this type of book about motherhood or with commentary on new motherhood is something I enjoy or not. In theory, I feel like I do and I should, but in practice, all of the ones that I've picked up, I haven't really enjoyed, like The Push by Ashley Audrain and some others that I can't think of right now. But I'm on the hunt for a really great book about the struggles of early motherhood. So if anybody has any recommendations, I would happily take those. But this, I unfortunately don't think is it. So that is all the books that I read in March and April of this year. Thank you for sticking through this entire video if you are still here. If you are, go ahead and drop a book stack emoji in the comments, because that was a lot of books we just talked about. Also, let me know if you've read any of the books that I talked about and what your thoughts were on them, whether we agreed or disagreed. And if you haven't read any of them, have I convinced you to pick any of them up or potentially not? Let me know. I would love to hear about it. Other than that, I don't think I have anything else. So thank you so much for watching this video, and I will see you in my next one.